Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Less than 6 miles from Ukraine's border. That's where satellite images now show Russian military forces. President Putin's gambit of recognizing two breakaway regions of Ukraine and placing troops there has the United States convinced a full-scale invasion is coming.
All American diplomats in Ukraine have moved to Poland for their safety, and President Biden has urged Ukraine's president to flee Kiev. Jenna Browder brings us the latest on this escalating crisis.
Putin's recognition of the breakaway territories followed by Russian troops is being met with global condemnation. The U.S. has already imposed some sanctions, and more are expected today.
We are going to be imposing significant sanctions on Russia.
Overnight, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, calling the move a clear attack on Ukraine's sovereignty.
This move by President Putin is clearly the basis for Russia's attempt to create a pretext for a further invasion of Ukraine. He has since announced that he will place Russian troops in these regions. He calls them peacekeepers. This is nonsense. We know what they really are.
Russia now says its recognition of independence extends even to Ukraine-held parts of those eastern territories. Satellite images show Russian forces now less than 6 miles from the border. CBN's George Thomas on the ground in Lviv, Ukraine.
Putin has at least three options right now. One, he can take the next couple of days and assess how the Ukrainians as well as the international community respond. Two, he can create these so-called false flag operations, accusing the Ukrainians of trying to attack his forces that would give him the pretext to launch a larger invasion into the east. Or three, he can launch an imminent full-scale invasion and take the entire two provinces and then set his sights on Kyiv.
The White House urging Ukraine's President Zelensky to leave for his own safety. In a video posted to social media overnight, Zelensky urging calm and saying his citizens are strong and ready. Meanwhile, the UN ambassador is calling Putin's actions a threat to global stability. Oil prices nearing $100 a barrel Tuesday, the highest in 7 years. Today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to meet with Ukraine's foreign minister. And the 27-nation European Union is also standing with the United States and NATO and pledging harsher sanctions against Russia. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Well, it's what was predicted when the Duma asked President Putin to recognize these independent provinces as independent states, these breakaway provinces. That's the game plan, if you will. If we can get the map up and show you where we're talking about, this is the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Those are the two breakaway provinces. Way back in 2014, they declared independence from Ukraine. That was all reversed in a memorandum that Russia signed and recognized that they needed to remain as sovereign territory of Ukraine. Could Putin stop right here? The answer is yes. Will he? And that's sort of anybody's guess at this point. I would urge the president of the Ukraine to stay in the capital. Don't flee. Don't. You won't recover from that if you leave in fear of a Russian invasion. No. That's not going to happen. So let's pray. Let's pray that it stops here and doesn't go any further. But we'll see. It's all in Russia's hands. In other news, the FDA may soon authorize a fourth booster of the COVID vaccine. John Jessup has more on that from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That is right, Gordon. Studies show the Moderna and Pfizer boosters offer 91% protection from hospitalization, but after 4 to 5 months, the level of protection drops to 78%. That has the FDA's vaccine chief openly speculating about adding a booster shot in the fall. Still, officials stress more data is needed before recommending a fourth shot.
78% is pretty good. It likely will go down sometime. We don't know for sure. We're hoping it'll hold tight up there. But if it does go down, I think you can expect some modification of the recommendation.
Meanwhile, new infections continue to fall across the country. This as health officials release emerging data on a new subvariant of Omicron, suggesting it's more severe. And new revelations from the New York Times show that the CDC is not publishing large portions of the COVID data it collects. The Times reports the agency has failed to publish critical data on boosters, hospitalizations, and until recently, wastewater information. The CDC spokesperson said the agency is slow to release some data because it wants to ensure what it calls accurate and actionable information, and because of concerns that it could be misinterpreted. Well, turning now to Canada and that government's response to the weeks-long protests over COVID restrictions. Monday night, lawmakers voted to extend the emergency powers used to break up protests so police can use them to put down any potential reprisals of the blockades. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau making his case to Parliament ahead of the vote.
But even though the blockades are lifted across border openings right now, even though things seem to be resolving very well in Ottawa, this state of emergency is not over.
Streets in Canada's capital of Ottawa are quiet again after some weekend clashes between police and protesters. The Emergencies Act allows authorities to declare certain areas as no-go zones. It also allows police to freeze truckers' personal and corporate bank accounts and compel towing companies to haul away vehicles. Trudeau's opponents have accused him of going too far, engaging in government overreach. While a group of American truckers is making a cross-country trip to protest COVID restrictions, it's called the People's Convoy and is scheduled to leave Southern California today with about 10 stops on its way to the Washington, D.C. area. The group says it does not plan to enter the district itself when it arrives next week, and it will abide by agreements with local authorities. The group is calling for an end to the COVID national emergency President Biden extended earlier this month, as well as a withdrawal of vaccine and mask mandates. Other groups are planning convoys right here to the nation's capital. Well, turning now to the Middle East, where Israel's prime minister criticized an emerging deal over Iran's nuclear program. Naftali Bennett said it would be weaker than a previous agreement and create a more violent Middle East. World powers have been negotiating in Vienna to revive the 2015 nuclear deal, which the Trump administration withdrew from back in 2018. Bennett warned Iran has moved ahead since then with its enrichment of uranium to levels approaching weapons grade, adding that Israel would not accept a nuclear Iran.
We have a clear and unnegotiable red line. Israel will always maintain its freedom of action to defend itself.
Well, one U.S. senator flew to Israel to see firsthand the risks the Jewish state faces. And as CBN's Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, he agrees that it's vital to keep a watchful eye on Iran.
Senator Lindsey Graham came to Jerusalem to learn more from Israeli officials about how close Iran is to a nuclear weapon.
I don't know how close they are, but after being briefed, I'm more nervous than I was before I came. And I'm going to go back home to our intel officials, compare notes, and see if we can get the Biden administration to work with Republicans and Democrats and the Israelis to clearly articulate what we mean when we say no weapon.
Graham wants Israel and the U.S. to be fully unified when it comes to drawing lines in the sand with Iran.
The purpose here is to establish red lines, to let the Iranians know in the area of weaponization, enrichment, and missile technology, what would be red lines if you crossed, all bets are off. I think the world would be a safer place if we could provide clarity to the Iranian regime as to what we mean by you can't have a nuclear weapon.
This threat, combined with other international issues, come at a time when America is perceived as weak, especially by its enemies. Graham is convinced Israel will move against Iran if it feels the need. The Iranian threat includes a dangerous mix of nuclear technology and religious ideology. Graham says his visit brings a message to Israelis while also sending one to Americans.
To our friends in Israel, America has your back. We have common values. We have common enemies. I regularly pray for our friends here in Israel. The eyes and ears for America is Israel in a troubled region. I tell all my constituents back home, why does Israel matter so much to us? Well, there's a religious component, in my view, but just without any concern for religion, it's a democracy in a troubled region that is America's eyes and ears to protect our homeland. And any threat to Israel is really a threat to us.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Gordon, back to you.
Well, I don't see how Iran can cross any more red lines. They certainly have funded. They're the largest funder of state terrorism in the world. They fund Hezbollah. They fund Hamas. They're providing drone technology right now to the terrorist leadership of Hamas in Gaza. They've given drone technology to Yemen. They're fighting a proxy war there. They launched a drone attack against a refinery in Saudi Arabia. How many more things do they have to do? They seized one of our naval vessels. The list goes on and on and on. How many military bases do they have to attack in Iraq before we say no more? So instead of saying, well, what are our lines? What are our red lines? I think anything we say at this point will be viewed as a bluff. So are they going to develop a nuclear weapon? That's their stated goal. They've been pursuing it for some time. They've had numerous setbacks from all these developments, but they still continue down that path. What is that red line? What is that weapon? For the sake of Israel, we need to say right now that this can't go forward, but are we willing to back that up with actual action? Right now, we seem to be, let's take those sanctions away. All the things that appeared to be working are now, all of that's being taken off the table. And frankly, I don't understand our current foreign policy on this. It just makes no sense to me.